All right, today we have Jason Van Camp on the power of our story, Coffee and Conversation, and it is an honor to have you. I honestly looked through your bio and I thought, oh my gosh, what in the world do I pick out from that? Because it's so diverse, it's so amazing. And just for all of you who did not get his bio, I'm just going to pick out a few things. He's a decorated Green Beret, world traveler, entrepreneur, author, loyal friend, and he's mastered the art of storytelling that reflects many of his own life adventures. He also graduated from West Point, and he was a linebacker for the Army Black Knights football team. Yeah. And then served a 2-year LDS mission to Russia. And then also, while he was there, graduated, won the prestigious General Lofke Award for Excellence in Foreign Languages. He's the founder and executive director of Warrior Rising. All of his contact links are in the chat, by the way. So he's also the CEO of Mission 60, and he's the best-selling author of Deliberate Discomfort, How United States Special Operations Forces Overcome Fear and Dare to Win by Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. And so anyway, Jason, what an honor to have you. I'm so intrigued by everything that I've been seeing and all the stuff on LinkedIn about your challenges. So welcome, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for reaching out to me and inviting me to the show. I see a lot of people that I've connected with on LinkedIn and in comments and a lot of friends on here as well. So this is awesome. I'm happy to be here, guys. Thanks for joining. I appreciate the love.
Great. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, share your story, and then we'll just go ahead and have a conversation after this.
I love it. So the bio that you just read, it's always awkward and more to write a bio for yourself. So if you guys ever get into that position, have a good friend write that bio for you. That's what I did. A friend of mine wrote that for me, and I still cringe. I still feel a little awkward hearing it, when somebody reads it. My story begins in Virginia. That's where I grew up. I love that state. I love being from that area, and where I grew up was right outside Washington, D.C. And so it's pretty clear to us growing up that there were two enemies. Number one, the Dallas Cowboys, and number two, the Russians. So that's kind of how we grew up. I grew up a big Redskins fan, now Washington football team fan, and Baltimore Orioles were my baseball team and everything else. And so growing up like that, my mother worked for Delta Airlines and my father worked for the government. He was in the military during the Vietnam era. He got injured, and then he ended up coming back to DC working as a bartender until he eventually worked for the government for a long time. And so that's what he did with his life. And I had a great family. My dad didn't graduate from high school. He got his GED. My mother went to a little bit of college, but not much. Went to the University of Georgia for, I think, a semester. And so they were blue collar, working class people, and that's how I grew up. And so I tend to get long-winded, guys. So I don't want to, just talk, incessantly the whole time. So I'd love to stop and just get your feedback and go through questions like that. However you want to run it, Sarah, but stop me if I'm going long.
Sorry about that delay. No, it's great. However you want to do it. I think so many people know of you. We could start the conversation. I bet a lot of people have questions. It is interesting to me. I'll just start it off. It's fascinating to me that you have so many different angles of you. Like, where do you get your passion to become so well-rounded, yet you are excellent in so many areas? And does that kind of move into why you wrote the book, Deliberate Discomfort?
I always wear my white belt. I'm always learning. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm like a student of everything. And I love learning. I love passion. I love storytelling. And I grew up, and I told this story this morning to some of my tribe. When I was young, we'd always have a Christmas dinner at my grandparents' house. And every year, my uncles, my dad, they would sit around the table and they would tell stories, and they would talk about military exploits. They would talk about business. They would talk about chasing women. They would talk about, telling hilarious stories, talking about whatever. And it always seemed like they always one-upped each other, one after the next. And I always wanted to contribute to this round table, but I couldn't because I didn't have any stories. I was too young. I didn't have any life experiences. I hadn't done anything with my life. And so at a young age, I kind of vowed to myself, I told myself, you know what, Jason, one day you're going to have more stories than all these guys. And I want you to live your life like that. And so most of my young life, my young adulthood, I spent searching for stories, searching for the next story, trying to be a story collector. And it wasn't so much that you had to get stories, but you had to be a good storyteller on top of it. And what I learned was the worse experience it is for you, the better story it is for everybody else. Because nobody really wants to talk about, how incredible somebody is. They want to talk about your shortcomings and you being vulnerable and you being confident in your vulnerability. That's a phrase that Jake Edwards coined a few days ago, which I loved, being confident in your vulnerability. And when I got to the Special Forces, I went to the Special Forces Assessment Selection course, and sort of my mindset shifted during that time, because although I was just looking for the next story, trying to collect these stories so I could, fulfill my identity and my purpose, I realized that life isn't just about stories. It's not about trophies. It's about people, and it's about the journey that you take with those people. And so at that time, my mindset shifted to, I want to help others. I want to be a leader. I want to make sure that I put the needs of my team and my teammates above my own. And so in the Special Forces, we talk about this in the book a lot. We have a certain criteria that we look at: mission, team, teammate, self. All the way at the bottom is yourself. And I realized, when you collect these stories, it's not a memory unless you're doing it with someone. And that's when it really becomes powerful. And that's my purpose now, is to help other people and do epic things. And ultimately, it's going to be a good story at the end of the day. Well, hopefully it will be.
Was there a defining moment in your journey that, sometimes you hear, like, I know for me, when I lost my dad to suicide, that shift in me is really the start of why I'm doing this today. And did you have any of those defining moments that were so crushing, but you overcame it and that fueled you to kind of be who you are today?
Those defining moments really do shape your identity and your mindset going forward. I had several smaller, which I thought at the time were huge moments, defining moments, but looking back on them, they were just kind of stepping stones to major defining moments. I guess on my second deployment, which was my first deployment as a detachment commander in the Special Forces, it was a really rough one. On my second day there, my vehicle convoy hit an IED. And it was such an odd experience because I had left the compound in a 3-vehicle convoy, and we were going to go scout out a location for my team to live. We were going to go embed with the Iraqis in a location that hadn't seen coalition forces, so I hadn't seen a presence there in 3.5 years. And on the way up there, I got a call from my boss. And he was on the radio, and he's like, "Jason, I'm flying into your location later today. I need to meet with you, and I want you to turn the vehicles around and, and stay back at the base that you just came from, because we're going to be meeting later today. We got some strategy that we got to discuss and so forth." So I said, okay. And I turned the vehicles around, and I got one of my guys to replace me in my vehicle. And I gave him a brief. His name was Zach. I was like, "Okay, Zach, this is what I need you to do for the site survey." He's like, "Roger, sir, got it. No worries." And so those 3 vehicles left the convoy, and I remember walking back to my my rack, and a little kind of makeshift compound. We had a cot there, and I remember walking in to this little kind of hut, and I took my helmet off, took my body armor off. put my weapon down. And I remember hearing on the radio, troops in contact, troops in contact, troops in contact. And I sort of, slowly, nonchalantly walked into the commo room. It's kind of a secure area that we have where we're monitoring all the communication in country. And there was a guy behind the radio who wasn't on my team. He was on the team that we were sort of ripping out with. And I just sort of asked him, I was like, hey, who's in contact? Which team? And he kind of put his headset down. He looked at me. He's like, your team. And I was like, what? He's like, your guys are in contact. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, your guys are in a firefight right now. I was like, it's impossible. They just left like 15 minutes ago. He's like, no, it's your guys. So we confirmed it. I threw my stuff back on as quickly as I could. I got as many guys that were just around as I could. We jumped in some vehicles, some Humvees, and we took off as fast as we could. And so we got out there, and the battle was over, but the damage had been done. The vehicle that I was sitting in, 15, 20 minutes prior, was completely destroyed, and it was on its side. The guy that replaced me in the vehicle, Zach, he when the ID went off on this vehicle, he put both of his arms out to kind of brace himself, and we found him. Both of his arms were completely folded back, so kind of his forearms were all the way up at his shoulders, kind of hanging there like spaghetti, and he was in shock. And Scott, who was in the turret, he had been ejected literally 100 feet down the road, and he hit the road. His weapon, his M4, got snapped in two. I've never seen a weapon snapped in two before. And he was delirious. He didn't know what was going on, severely concussed. And he was trying to fight by putting his weapon back together. And you can't do that. The weapon's just not working. And we kind of got him calmed down. One of the SF guys that wasn't on my team that we're ripping out with, he lost his leg, and there was an interpreter that died. We got them all in a medevac, and they all got out of there. And my two guys recovered nicely, and they're fine right now. And they actually came back to the team eventually. But the situation, I went looking in the desert. I found some copper wire that were basically hidden IEDs and under this culvert, and this copper wire was leading out into the desert. And I found some motorcycle tracks, and and I got back on the radio and I reported to my boss what was going on, and he was like, okay, Roger, got it. And he's like, okay. And I was like, well, sir, are you still planning on coming in later today? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, you called me earlier. You said you were flying in. You wanted me to come back to base and everything. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, that's why I turned the vehicles around. You called me. You told me to do this. You were very thorough in that explanation. And he was like, I didn't call you, Jason. I have no intent of coming to your compound. That wasn't me, man. And I was like, well, sir, it was you. Like, there's no reason. I wouldn't have done that otherwise. Like, you called me. You told me to do this. He's like, wasn't me. And so I was surprised. I was like, I'm not sure how that happened. I know for a fact it was him. Either he forgot, it was some sort of, somebody looking out for me and for the team, in that situation. So I knew from that experience that I had people looking out for me, and later in that deployment, we were in situations where bullets were flying, IEDs, bombs, really precarious, dangerous situations, as most people are. And for us, we were in this particular operation, we were going to do a presence patrol. We'd heard that there were, you get these reports all the time, and vast majority of them were bogus. And one of the guys in the area was like, there's 200 bad guys in this town. And we're like, yeah, right, buddy. Okay, we'll go check it out. And so we went up there, and sure enough, I mean, there weren't 200 guys, but there was a good, 25 Al-Qaeda, battalion, they called themselves there in this compound, and they had completely taken over this town. They had installed Sharia law there and everything. So we got ourselves in a pretty good firefight, and we killed like 14 guys. We captured 9 guys, and my team sergeant was shot through the legs, and my 18 Charlie, my engineer, Rob, he was shot in the head. And when I got to him, We heard Eagles down again. And so I took my vehicle all the way up to the compound where the enemy was holed up. I got out, ran to Don. I was furious at him. I shouldn't have been that angry at him, and he just looked at me with these defeated eyes. Like I could tell he had sort of like his soul had given up a little bit and he felt like he was dying. So I had my medic take care of him first. I went around the corner and my 18 Bravo, Chris, he's his weapons guy. He's awesome. And he was sort of on all fours, kind of scrambling around. And I was like, Chris, what's going on? I was like, pull security right there. And I could tell that his mind wasn't all there. Like he wasn't there. And I saw Rob, who was laying on his back. And I could tell he was shot, but I didn't know where. And so I started looking on his body for the blood. And I was like, Chris, where did he get shot? Where did he get shot? Couldn't find any blood. And he goes, he got shot in the head, Jay. And I looked at his helmet and I could tell that there was a bullet, the journey of a bullet had kind of gone through his Kevlar helmet, and I could see the exit point. And I was just kind of praying that it hadn't gone all the way through his head and sort of maybe just grazed him or whatever. And I pulled off his helmet and he was still alive. The bullet didn't go straight through his skull, but it kind of went right through the side of his skull. And, I just had to hold his head together with my hands. And we got him on top of our Humvee and we rolled back to a safer location where we could treat him all. And, to his credit, Rob was fighting the whole time to stay alive. But then, ultimately we got Don, my team sergeant, and Rob on the helicopter and got him out of there. And Rob expired on the helicopter, unfortunately. And that was the defining moment. That was the wake-up call for me, where this is real. You're a leader, you're a commander. People are trying to kill you and your team. You have to – you can't be a child any longer. You can't be a young adult. You can't be a guy, that's thinking of himself. You got to be a guy who's thinking of your team and making sure that they're taken care of, Otherwise things like this are going to happen. So that was the defining moment for me in my experiences.
People, feel free to speak up for a question. That is really powerful, Jason. I would love to just ask, how did you recover from that? Like being out there, second day you said as an officer, or second day as after being deployed, or you ran into the first incident. How do you recover from all that?
It's each his own, I know guys in the military that didn't see anything close to that, and they suffer significantly from post-traumatic stress. And for guys in our community, in the Special Forces community, at first you kind of think, oh, they're BSing it, man. Like, you didn't see this, you didn't see that. But it's not true. I mean, to each his own. I know guys that are really struggling, with post-traumatic stress. And I've seen guys that have seen worse things than that are totally fine, normal, functioning human beings that don't have seemingly don't have any post-traumatic stress whatsoever. And I tell you from my experiences, what I saw was this. The guys that mentally prepared themselves for what they were going to do and see in combat before they went out there, those were the guys that typically handled it pretty well. Like, hey, you're going to get into a firefight. You're going to fire your weapon. You're going to kill people. You're going to run into IEDs. This is what it looks like when somebody's shot. This is what it looks like to treat an injury. This is what it looks like when you get hit by an IED. These are people that have been hit by IEDs. These are people that have been shot. This is what it's like. If you kind of digest all that information, and really take it to heart. And so when you have that at your disposal, when you actually go to combat, when you experience things, it's almost as though you don't have to make a decision in the moment. You've already made that decision. You already know what you're going to do. So you don't have that stress and that power over you of what do I do? What do I do? You know what you're going to do. The guys that really didn't think it through, that just kind of shrugged it off, or maybe didn't really have the capacity, the creativity to think about, man, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be doing this. What is that going to be like? Can I show, what kind of empathy can I have for these people? What can I think about and do right now? The people that didn't make those decisions beforehand, when they're presented with that, that situation, and in the spur of the moment, they have to do something. They have to say something. They have to act, and they haven't prepared themselves for that. I think a lot of those guys have a hard time with that. And that's what I've seen from our community and just talking with guys, you know, that's sort of a common theme, I think.
Wow, that's powerful. Does anybody have any questions for Jason? I'm sure some of you have experienced maybe something similar, or
Yeah, I was gonna add. This is Jake Edwards. I was gonna add. I think Jason brings a great point up about the acknowledgement of what the future might hold, and that comes into training as well. But you know, as a young Marine, where I graduated boot camp, and a year later to the month, I was in Fallujah, Iraq, waiting for the battle. You know what I mean? So it's relative to your experience and your time in service as well, but also what your mission is. Because as Marines, you know, we were just there to just tear things up, and training was limited to what you needed minimum for your tier requirement for deployment. So I think a lot of it has to go to the individual, like Jason said, but also once you're outside of that environment, it's all about how can you control the emotions that trigger the past experience. And I think part of that is not locking it away and hiding it. It's accepting it the way that works for you, whether it's by journaling and writing about it, or maybe talking to someone in your team or someone that had relevant experience as well. But for, you know, just a young Marine that was in heavy combat, you know, the Battle of Fallujah, I was attached. So I was fighting with guys I didn't know every day because I was a demo guy. And that's hard because you don't train that way back home. So a lot of it goes, I think, to just how you can, like I said, take what you experienced later and learn to understand how to articulate it through language and words, not just emotion.
That's well said. I'll tell you, you know, growing up, I was fascinated by the military, and I would ask veterans, you know, what was it like? You know, I didn't ask questions like, hey, what was it like to kill somebody or anything like that? But I was like, hey, tell me some stories. What was it like? And in my era, it was always like, the answer was, I don't want to talk about it, or you're too young, kid, or, you know, and it was kind of weird for me. I was like, wow, man, like, what did this guy experience? What did he see? What did he do that kind of shuts him up and kind of holds it in? What was that like? And it kind of drove me to wanting to be in the military and wanting to go to the special forces and wanting to see what these people saw so I could do it myself and I could experience it myself. And having done that, I look back on my youth and I ask myself, you know, I would like to ask these people, why don't you share this? What are you hiding? Why is it so hard for you to be vulnerable and share your stories? Because you know what? It's cathartic. And you know what? It also helps other people. You know, the Green Berets are called the quiet professionals. And I tell my guys all the time, don't be silent professionals, you know, because it's not just about you, it's about helping other people. You know, if someone else can hear your story and they can get value out of it, if some other Marine or Green Beret or Navy SEAL goes to combat and by you sharing with that person your experiences, they're going to be better for it, then you're doing a great disservice to your country and to them by not sharing that story. You know, and that's how I look at it. Like, let's tell these stories. Let's be open. Let's be honest. Let's be authentic. And you know, as Jake says, let's have that confident vulnerability and be okay with it.
I looked at,
Man, they got a couple people.
yeah, please go ahead.
I can relate in a way that when I was a child, you know, a kid, my dad was a Navy SEAL during Vietnam. And I remember, you know, kind of going back to your stories and, you know, kind of, when you talk to older generations about something as a kid, they just kind of would shut you off. And I remember going through a closet area and run across the chest my dad had, and I opened it up and it had a lot of his military, he had his uniform and his awards, and I thought this was just, you know, I just started rummaging through it and I ran across this like twine string that at the time as a kid, I kind of thought, why are these, apricots, dried up apricots on this string? And there was like 12 of them or something. I think I remember it was 12 because I was counting. Like, why is this? And I remember, going to my dad when he came home and said, I basically pulled it out and brought it to him and said, what is this? I found this. And it was the rage that he kind of presented, with me. It was very upset that I went through that, and, kind of just shut me down, basically kind of was like I could have just got my hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, right? I was in trouble. And then it wasn't until years later that, he kind of came out and said, he remembered that incident when I came out of the Navy, out of my boot camp. And I asked him kind of again about that, brought it up, somehow the subject come up, and he was like, I really wasn't prepared to talk about that, but those were my confirmed kills. As a SEAL, we used to, they would cut the ear off of their kill and put them on this string and wear it around their neck. And, that was just like one of the most profound kind of stories that, as I could pretty much understand, as probably a 12-year, or 14-year-old kid, I would not have been able to fathom that, hearing that story. But then as I was an adult to hear that story, it kind of made me understand a little bit more about where my dad came from, and kind of going back to your, the storytelling of it helps us understand that, and that's one of the things that I strive for, is even working with veterans, is letting them tell their story, because it's a healing process. Because after my dad had said that and kind of came through and told me exactly what that situation was like, you almost felt that we had a better connection, and he lifted a weight off of his shoulder by just telling me the story.
That's a great one, man. Great story. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, this is Bobby. I would echo that. My dad was a 4th ID veteran in the Central Highlands in Vietnam, and same thing, man. He didn't talk about hardly anything from his time in country. The stuff that he would talk about was really innocuous. Like, he would talk about the food. He would talk about, like just little things, and it wasn't often. And then when I was deployed, and I didn't even think about this beforehand, but when I was deployed, my mom said he was just an absolute basket case. It was so hard for him. And I understood it at the time, because I was going, holy shit. And before I left, I thought it was going to be the opposite. Like, mom was going to be a basket case and dad would be like, yeah, he's over there doing his job. I understand it. But the issue or the reality was that he knew exactly what it's like to be in harm's way. He knew exactly what it was like now to be the dad when the son was deployed, because he was the son that was deployed. My grandfather was a World War II Navy veteran that served in the Aleutians, which was really brutal duty. And, the point here is just that connection and that ability to make that connection, and then possibly get that person to open up, that person, like in my case, being my dad. And he still hasn't opened up a lot to me, but I was able to convince him, because I was going to therapy, to get him to connect with some Vietnam veterans. And now he has this group of guys that they were in a Vietnam group at a vet center, excuse me. And now, like, they have breakfast together and they tell those stories. And I mean, that value is really hard to fathom. And for a lot of guys, just that storytelling will actually be enough. Like, they don't necessarily have to go talk to a therapist. They don't necessarily have to have, pharmaceuticals. Just that ability to reconnect with people. And, and we have the ability in this day and age to reconnect with our brothers and sisters that we serve with so much easier, because my dad's only been able to reconnect with like 1 or 2 guys that he actually either served with in Vietnam, or there's a guy that they went through boot camp together but ended up in different units. And that power is amazing. I've been able to do that, sporadically over the years. And then recently with some of my ROTC buddies, and we all went in, different directions in life and in service and in civilian life, and to be able to share our stories together and it's been in the last few weeks because we had a buddy that he's a Green Beret, and he made some huge mistakes, and he's going to lose his career because he didn't get help and he didn't connect with the people that he needed to.
Great stuff, Bobby.
I think it's great for veterans to have the bravery, I guess you can call it, to share their stories and to be transparent and to be vulnerable. And that is one of the main reasons why for the last 3 years I've wanted to become a motivational speaker and use my life story of all the hell and all the trials and all the tribulation of true life that I've been through, to be able to get in front of large groups of people and teach them how to overcome all these hardcore adversities that nobody ever wants to talk about, whether that be combat or whether that be, a drug addiction that they used to have, or maybe they went to jail on a false allegation and they don't want that skeleton to come out of the closet. But as far as my combat time, I can tell you that the PTSD and the scariest part of combat was when you was on the 130 flying over there for the very first time. When we were at 29 Palms training to go over there, we were badasses. We had that attitude. We had everything, that warrior mentality. We talked a lot of shit amongst each other. Oh, I can't wait to get over there and kill me some commie bastards and all this other garbage. But for me and for so many of my buddies, man, the PTSD and the true fear completely consumed you when you knew that 130 was on its way to Fallujah, and you were about to get dropped in a combat zone for the first time in your entire life, and now it's real. It's no longer a game. It's no longer, you're no longer talking shit and having a big head. And I think, one of the reasons why so many veterans don't want to talk about their combat stories is because the fear that they had to overcome while they were en route to the actual zone is that in itself was probably the biggest mind fuck for me, because when I was actually in country, the fear settled down and you was able to mask and hide all of the PTSD and all of the trauma, because you were already there. You knew what you were facing now. You knew that you could be in a convoy tomorrow morning and not come back to base. I mean, so you literally just hid all that and buried it. And then when you come back from being over there, the only thing you're trying to process is how to get rid of that fear that you felt on the way over there. But that was just for me anyway. Well, a lot of my buddies felt the same way. And just the things that we saw over there, we're still processing that, because we don't know how to digest that ourselves other than to put it in an aggressive mentality.
Nicely put, Jack. Thanks for sharing. Awesome.
If you don't mind, Jason, I have a comment and a question, not really two questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
First, I want to mention, it seems like a lot of our fathers fought in Vietnam. My father did too. He was 312. He was a FO for the United States Marine Corps. I didn't know as a child, but now that I'm older, I've seen his DD-214. He's had 21 combat missions and 1 year in country, which I think anybody on here, even you, Jason, would imagine that's a lot of combat for an FO. He never said anything to me as a child except for about Vietnam, except for I knew he was a Marine. So I always knew I wanted to be a Marine. And my experiences are nothing as heroic as yours. Unfortunately, all I got to do was pick up body parts and see ashes. There was no enemy to fight by the time I got there. And I think I realized after I got older, when I went into Paris Island, my father would write me letters about Vietnam. And I think I realize now, older, a lot of us don't talk about it because of the shame that we didn't do what we didn't give as much as we thought we could. Even though you wanted to, you gave everything you had, but sometimes later when you process it, you're like, man, if I only push that, I push 110%, but if I push 112, maybe there would have been a difference. And I normally am not emotional at all, but listening to you got me kind of emotional. And I guess the question I have for you, it's not really it's a question. I looked at Warrior Rising and what you've done, and I 100% respect that. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm trying to get my business going. And you said, epic. Hopefully it will be epic, right? And make a new epic story. And I'm finding that, you have, with epic success, there's probably 3 times as many epic failures. So I guess my question to you, once you became an entrepreneur and getting Warrior Rising and Mission 60 going, some days, I'm a double dog. We don't give up regardless, but there's days that you want to give up, but you don't, because you're a double dog. And sometimes you think to yourself, maybe it's better for my family. Maybe it's better for my mental health if I just throw in the towel, go get a job at a warehouse and call it a day. At what stage do you weigh those benefits? At what stage do you overcome those benefits, and how did you do that? And how did you get it to the point where it was successful? I guess would be my question.
That's a great question. Thanks for all that. The comments are fantastic, man. And I can feel the passion coming from you, and I see in the chat box, there's some fantastic comments as well from Scott and Tammy. Awesome stuff. To answer your questions, it's constantly and it's consistently. I set a goal. I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be this. And like you guys serving in the military, their failure is not an option. You succeed or you fail. That's it. And the way that I looked at it was, throughout my life, while I was searching for stories and putting myself in uncomfortable positions, knowing that I'd probably fail and knowing that they would probably be great stories because of it, I understood what failure really is. And that's a learning experience. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. So whenever I lost initially in my life, I would take it really hard. And it was almost a part of my identity. And I'd use it as fuel to drive me to succeed at something else. And then I realized, every time you fall down, the only thing you can control is getting yourself back up. And as fast as you can get yourself back up, that's as fast as you're going to be successful in life. And so whenever something occurs, it's a failure. I look at it for a second, I take a deep breath and I say, okay, what did I do wrong? What can I learn from? How can I improve? Let's get up, let's move on, and let's get after it. And I don't mind people laughing at me either, when it comes to that, to an extent, plenty of times in both of my businesses where I could have thrown in the towel. And I think if you talk to any real entrepreneur, they're going to tell you the exact same thing. Plenty of times, you think to yourself, this is so stupid. Why am I doing this? Why am I making life hard on myself? I could be getting paid, over here doing this job, working for somebody else, so much easier. It comes down to me, my values. Like, what are my values? And we talk a lot about this at Mission 60. Who am I? What's my identity? And we do an exercise at Mission 60 where you look at, hundreds of different types of values. And then you look at, you pare it down till you have 3 to 5 values, which is like, these are my top 3 or 5 values. This is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm all about. And for me, I pared it down to loyalty, determination, and resourcefulness. And so whenever I meet somebody who has those same 3 values, we do great things together. And so whenever I tackle a project or do anything, I'm like, all right, does this fit my values? You know, like, can I do this? And for me, it's sort of like, if you never quit, you never fail. You know, there's no timeline to it. More or less, I'm sure we could come up with examples like that all the time. And being resourceful, sort of like that old book that they tell you about when you're young in the military, Message to Garcia. You know, you need to deliver this message to Garcia. Well, who's Garcia? I don't know. Just get it done. And the guy gets it done. You know, he goes and figures a way out to deliver this message to Garcia that's going to save the war, right? Awesome. And then loyalty. For the guys in my team, if you display loyalty to me, I will never fire you, no matter how many mistakes you make. If you're loyal, I got your back. You know, the same token, you know, if you're disloyal, then you're out of there pretty quick, you know, in that capacity. You got to have a team behind you, man. You can't do it on your own. If I ever try to tackle Mission 6-0 or Warrior Rising to do it all myself, like, number one, I'd be 10 years behind where I am now. And in those dark times, you know, when you're questioning yourself or your ability to succeed, or you've just been told by a big client that they're not going to purchase your product, or, you know, some seemingly catastrophic thing happens in your life, your team's going to pick you up and they're going to be there for you. And they're going to tell you, it's all right, man. Like, we'll take care of you. And then vice versa. The script's going to flip. You know, that person is going to have a dark day too. And you got to be there for them. And that's what I've seen in business. You know, to each his own. You have to determine your own values and pick teammates, the right teammates that believe in those values as well.
Right. Can I just when you mentioned loyalty, my inner team is very loyal, but what I've discovered is trying to find new people to work with to grow the business, and how to identify people that are genuine and actually genuine loyal. Like, we've had an issue already with somebody who used false valor to gain our trust, who actually did what he, and then we didn't find out till he knew just enough until I said FOPO and he didn't know what I was talking about. And because I knew he couldn't Google FOPO. I was like, anybody in the military that's ever served knows what FOPO is. And when he couldn't identify it, that's when like everything started to fall apart and we could catch him in lies. But so how do you find those genuine, real, loyal people? You know, we have our base, which we are very tight and loyal. But, you know, as you grow, you have to gain trust. And now we have trust issues with who we do business with, because we've run across people that are disingenuous, I guess is the best question. Could you maybe touch on that a little bit, or how you identify, you know, genuine people to actually work with, and how you guys do that with Warrior Rising?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And it's one I'm very familiar with, because when we bring somebody in, we ask them what their values are. And if they don't know, we take them through this exercise to understand what their values are. We ask them what their vision is, what their dream is, what they want out of this experience. You know, and a lot of times they haven't even thought through it themselves. And so you're doing this exercise with them in real time, and you find out what they want, what their purpose is, what their values are, and what they want to get out of this. And now that you know that as a leader, well, you can leverage that to get their buy-in. Because a lot of people come to us at Mission 6-0 and they say, you know, Jason, I started this company. I'm passionate about it. It's my baby. I want it to succeed more than anything. It's got to succeed. You know, but my employees, they don't feel the same way. They don't have the same amount of passion in this business that I do. How do I get them to buy in? How do I get them to do this, to feel my passion? I tell them, in order for them to buy into you, into your business, you got to buy into them first. You know, you got to take that uncomfortable leap of faith and buy into what their vision is, what their dream is. And if you can help them accomplish that, they'll do anything for you, anything for you. And as far as trust goes, you know, I talk about this in chapter 1 of Deliberate Discomfort. My boss asked me when I sat down and to get the initial leadership, you know, in brief philosophy from my commander, he's like, Jason, what are your top 3 lessons you've learned as an officer? And I said, you know, I guess it's 1, you know, officers eat last. You know, you got to make sure your team knows that you care about them. You know, 2, anything a team does or fails to do is your responsibility. And 3, trust your NCOs. And, you know, he kind of looked at me a little bit and he said, how did that work out for you? And I'm like, what do you mean, sir? He's like, trust your NCOs. How's that worked out for you? And I had to be honest with him. And I looked at him. I was like, well, it hasn't really worked out that great. He said, well, why? And I said, well, you know, there's guys, NCOs I've worked with, I've been in combat with, that I trust them, you know, explicitly, that would do anything for them. I know that if I'm in a firefight, this is the guy I want to my right. This is the guy I want to my left, you know, completely trust them. But then, you know, we'll go back to the States. We'll be back at Garrison, and the same guy, I can't trust him to not get a DUI. I can't trust him to not beat his wife. I can't trust him to do the inventory properly, and vice versa. There's guys back in the rear that, you know, if I needed an inventory done, the guy would be top notch, the best ever. But when we went to combat, he was useless, you know, and my commander was like, well, you shouldn't trust someone just because of their number of chevrons and rockers that they have on their uniform. You need to trust someone because you get to know them as a person. You know, you have Sergeant Jack Peterson. You know, don't trust Sergeant Peterson. You should be able to learn how to trust Jack Peterson. And once you get to that level, you'll really be understanding how to trust someone. And it goes both ways. You know, it's not just, you know, one way to the NCOs. It's back to the officers as well, you know. And the way that it was described to me was, you know, you have a spectrum of trust, and the spectrum starts with believing. And you got to take that uncomfortable leap of faith and believe in someone first and say, you know what, I don't really know you. I know where you've been. I know what you've been through. You know, I'm going to believe in you. And now let's build this trust together, meaning I'm going to give you actionable trust building exercises. For example, hey, I need you to complete this task on this date. This is the task, conditions, and standards and timeline. When you're done with it, come back and report to me. Okay, you know, and in the beginning, you sort of trust and verify. You make sure that they're doing it, and then they come back and to report you on time, and the product is above standard. Then you're doing really well, you know. And then you're like, okay, well, you bump up one more level on the trust spectrum, and then eventually you get all the way to the end of the spectrum where you're almost blindly trusting someone because of what they've proven to you in your relationship together. And it kind of goes the other direction as well. If someone fails to do what you asked, and you bump them down a notch, you know, and what you say as a leader has to be held accountable as well. If you say you're going to do something, you got to do it. Otherwise, your trust is going to be diminished in the eyes of your guys, and you're going to be bumped down a level as well. And so that's a long-winded answer, I guess, to how I would, answer that question.
No, Jason, it was a great answer. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your insight on it. You definitely answered the question. So.
Sweet.
Well, Jason,
Thank you.
yeah, I just want to thank you so much for being on. I want to be sensitive to your time. And we're already at an hour. Went way too fast. I think we
Went
could
fast.
be talking for 2 to 3 hours. It's been fascinating. And I have to say, I'm really touched by your integrity and your character, and just your mindset in even sharing these stories. And it's been a great conversation. I really want to thank all of you too for participating. So interesting. And Jason, honestly, I could listen to you for hours.
You're too kind. I thank you guys for joining and being here. Sarah, thanks for having me. Hope I added some value to you guys. And obviously, check me out on LinkedIn or Mission 60 Warrior Rising. Love to have you guys join the tribe, join the team if you're interested. I know he's got some guys on the team already, Jeff and Scott and Jake, and I hear from Jack all the time and Karen all the time. And this is awesome. Johnny Walker, great to meet you today. Great questions. Thanks for everything, guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, how do we get a signed copy of your book, man? I'm reading Embrace the Suck right now, man, and loving every chapter of it.
I haven't read, I think that's Brent Gleason's new book. I haven't read that one yet, but shoot me a line if you guys want to, jason@mission60.com. And I'll see about, if you're interested, getting you some signed copies. So let me know if you want to do that. I'll be more than happy to oblige.
Jason at what?
Mission60.com. All spelled out.
Everything's on the chat also, if you want to check that out. So